Welcome to episode 39 of the Busted Buttons video game podcast, and I gotta tell you, it feels pretty daggone good to get back to it after taking, what did we take off, 6 weeks?
Yep, 6
Something
weeks,
like
man.
that.
It was crazy.
Between holidays, both of us managed to get COVID. Your wife got COVID.
Well, I never tested positive, but I think I did have COVID. But yeah, it was a little bit. We don't like to take off more than 1 week, but it does happen here and there with life. But yeah, 6 weeks, man. That was definitely not planned, but you know, life gets in the way sometimes. It's crazy.
It does, but we may be a little rusty, a little shaky getting back to it, but we're gonna power through and do the best we can. And I gotta
it's
say,
like riding a bike. We've been doing YouTube for years, man. We got this. We got this.
Plus, we are very excited this week because we are going to be talking about one of our favorite PlayStation 4 games of the entire PlayStation 4 generation, and one of our favorite games, if not our favorite game of 2020, and that is Ghost of Tsushima. And I know we've been saying we're going to do it next episode, and next episode is finally here.
I was going to say, we are still doing it next episode. It just took 6 weeks to get to it. We had to spend a lot of time. You know what? We didn't have anything in life going on. We just needed to spend a lot of time preparing. It's going to take us like 8 weeks to get to The Witcher 3 when we do that episode, okay?
Don't get me started on that. But no, in this, we're going to talk about, of course, the story, the gameplay, the world of Tsushima, which was just beautiful. Some of the characters we meet along the way, and then some recognition for the game, and kind of our final closing thoughts at the very end. But just in general, Ghost of Tsushima came out midway through the year. I'll be honest, when it first got teased years ago at E3, I was hyped for it. Then they came out and said it was just going to be another open world game. And I was like, my hype kind of died a little bit because I'd been playing a lot of open world games at the time. And then it came out and it absolutely blew away my expectations. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, like I first saw, like you said, 2 or 3 years ago, for like the visuals. People always get on me on YouTube about saying that the proper way. But anyways, like people were just like, those visuals, like when you saw them, it was unlike anything that you had really ever seen in a game. Just the colors, they really popped in. It wasn't really on my radar at that time because it looked like a game that had a lot of combat. And I'm not like a huge combat guy. Like I'm more exploring, kind of collecting things. And then, you have a fight here and there. That's cool. That's why I like platforming so much, because you go through these worlds, you face usually a quick boss, unless it's Ori of the Will of the Wisp. But you know what? Not this episode. That's for another episode. But so, it was kind of my radar a little bit. It looked gorgeous. Looked like unlike anything that I had ever seen before in gaming. So, but at that time I didn't know it was an open world game, but it was on my radar.
Right.
And so, it was shocking when I was preparing for this that it just came out in July. Like, it feels like it takes me so long to get to games, and I rarely play games when they first come out. But this one, I don't know if I got it right away because I believe I was finishing up a game, but I got it pretty quickly. And then, here's what I want to say. Here's how you know a game is great. Like how quickly that you play. Now, it still took me 130 hours, but do you play that game and then take breaks and play other games, or do you just fly through that game? And this is one of the few games that I picked it up, I played it almost all the way through without playing another game. And I know
that's a good sign right there.
You flew through it. Now, you don't have kids or anything, but flew through it quicker than I did. So I think just starting off right here at the top, that right there tells you that it's an excellent game. We're going to kind of go into all the other stuff about the game. So, did you have anything else you want to say on general info, or do you want to go straight to the story?
I would just say I agree completely with you that it's one of those games that I picked up just like you, and I dumped 120, 130, however many hours it was into it, and never set it down. It was one of those that any time that I had time off, whether it was from work, seeing the girlfriend, whatever, I was like, I wasn't thinking about any other game.
That's how you also know a game is great, right there. Like, do you really take time? Like, when you have free time, is it what you do with all of your free time?
Exactly, and I remember I kind of compare it to the one of the other really huge popular games of 2020, and that was The Last of Us Part 2. I swear I picked up and set down The Last of Us Part 2 several times because other games drew me away. Like, I jumped into Mario 3D All Stars. And I think I started Ghost before I finished The Last of Us Part 2. So it was one of the... No, I think I was actually patient and waiting. But there was another game that I picked up somewhere while playing The Last of Us Part 2. And that
I don't remember what game it was, but I remember you doing something like that.
But I didn't do that for Ghost of Tsushima. And like you said, that's how you know something has grabbed you and kept your attention. Even after 100 plus hours, you weren't bored with it. You weren't tired of it. And that's... before jumping into, like we said, story, gameplay, all that, like that to me is a great sign where you feel engaged the whole time because it had a strong main story, it had strong side quests, the world was a blast to explore, and we will get into all that in more detail. But let's just start off with the story. And to be completely honest, I mean, the story is not necessarily that original on the surface. The Mongols invade the island of Tsushima on their way to conquer like mainland Japan, and you are a surviving samurai who is fighting back. And along the way, you recruit some allies, you free your uncle, and you fight back against the Mongols. And on the surface, that doesn't sound like that engaging of a story. It's great for setting up a good open world game. But I gotta say, the details in this story and the character development of Jin, the main character, and Jin Sakai was the main character's name. And then, the supporting characters and the way the story unfolded. We'll get into some specific elements, but I absolutely loved the story in general. Like, it had more twists and turns and emotions than I expected from that simple description that I just gave. And it really captivated me. And that's rare for an open world game to keep the twists and turns coming. Were you as big a fan of the story as I was?
I think it was still, even though the story wasn't great, like you said, in open world games, it's really hard to have a great story because the game is so spaced out over 130 hours. But I think compared to other open world games, it wasn't the best one. I think I would still give that to, shocker, here it comes, Witcher 3. But overall, I thought it was a great story. And you kind of said, it didn't change anything. It was it was not really innovative. I don't know if you said that, but we've talked about it behind the scenes.
We've definitely talked about it, yeah.
You can sit there and say, yeah, it's not really innovative, but it is different. And it's different because it's a samurai story. It's set in Japan. Most, open world stories, they're set in different locations, but we've not had a game that focused on the Japanese culture like this game did. So I did love that part of it because, no, it's not a history lesson or anything. It's a work of fiction, but you can still learn about the culture and the samurai a little bit from playing a game like this. So, I wouldn't say I really learned a lot, but it was just cool how different it was. And in a world, the gaming world, where we get a lot of these stories, open world that aren't necessarily the same. Of course, they are all different, but they're similar in a way.
Yeah.
The way they're structured and what they're kind of based around, whether it be, not open world, that's what we're talking about. Whether it's like GTA 5 and Cyberpunk, where it's more cars and guns, or it's Assassin's Creed, where it's swords and shields and axes. This game definitely had the swords, and was there shields in the game?
Just on the invading Mongols, you didn't have one.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I didn't remember actually having a shield in the game. But anyways,
well, you've played a few open world games since then because you've been playing Valhalla and a couple other things.
Yeah,
so it's easy.
I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place right now in open world games. But I did just play the Taurus, and hey, little plug for the Taurus. That is a good breakup for more complex games. You all go out there. It's on Game Pass. If you have Xbox, try it out. I think it's on the other systems. I really don't know. I'm all full blown Xbox right now because a little behind the scenes,
the Series X,
when I was prepared for this game, the first time I played, I was like, oh my God, and we're going to talk more about the world, but I feel like I've said it numerous times already in this podcast. Maybe we are going to struggle a little bit in the beginning, but
we'll get to it eventually.
Y'all don't know behind the scenes, we struggle light. We just kind of play it off and laugh ourselves, but I remember going through this game and it was beautiful, but now I'm like this next gen snob because I'm going through it today and I don't know if it's all mental or if it just looks crappy compared to the Xbox Series X, but I'm like, Ghost of Tsushima doesn't look as good as I thought it did. Now, I think I'm just a next gen snob right now. I think that's what it is. I think it is still a beautiful game, but kind of got off topic there a little bit, but
it's all good.
Go ahead and continue on with the story and what you want to say with it.
So my biggest thing with the story, like I said, on the surface, and this is going to play off kind of what you said about learning a little bit about the samurai and the Japanese culture, even though it is a work of fiction, but it's I really loved how, despite the very simple story setup and the very straightforward mission you have, get the Mongols off the island of Tsushima, it's pretty straightforward. The development of your character, of Jin Sakai, and him having
and the conflicts that he faces.
Exactly, him having to make decisions that kind of go against the honor-driven lifestyle and beliefs of the samurai and become, the quote unquote, the ghost, and start resorting to stealth, to poison, to assassination. All of that goes against what we're told is the samurai way, which is all
literally
about
stabbing
honor.
people in the back. That's what he's doing now.
Yeah, and like so the samurai way is all like, face your opponent head to head, honor, and we see at the very beginning. I really loved this I think it was like the opening cutscene where one of the samurai steps out to challenge Khotun Khan, the leader of the invading Mongols, and he's like, I challenge you to a duel or whatever. And the Khotun Khan just throws oil on him and torches him.
Yep. That's at the very beginning. Yep.
That's the very beginning of the game. I guess we should have said there's going to be spoilers throughout this podcast.
Yeah. Hopefully they. Yeah, we probably should have said that.
If we're talking about a game,
we're talking about something at the beginning of the game. But yes, there will be spoilers. I don't even know if you said we're going to talk Ghost of Tsushima the entire podcast episode. But guess what? We're talking Ghost of Tsushima the entire podcast episode. But no,
there's going to be spoilers. So I love that they show. And I'll let you go here in just a second.
That's fine.
So they showed the Mongols being kind of the dirty, underhanded assholes right off the bat. But then as you go through the game playing as Jin, you have to resort to worse and worse things to get them off the island. So it's a really interesting take on you kind of adapting the tactics of the Mongols and going against your own people to save your people. And I thought they did a great job of showing that conflict. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot. It wasn't like a choice-driven game. There's not a lot of choice. Like you have to. That's the way it pushes you to go. But I did love that they really showed off that conflict in your character, and then like the elder samurai. Your uncle who's so driven by his honor that he despises what you're turning into, and like Khotun Khan is trying to use that to drive a wedge between you and your uncle. It's a really fun. An interesting dynamic that I really appreciate, and I think it was probably my favorite part of the story, is just watching what Jin had to do to overcome the invaders. So anyway, I told you I'd let you go again, so I'll shut up for a second.
I do want to say something, first of all. We will probably, or at least I will, mispronounce some of these names. Now, if we would have talked about this game like quicker after I got done with it, I probably wouldn't know every single name, but I was looking at a lot of these today. I was like, oh crap, how do you say these names? But Khotun Khan. Okay, first of all, there's some villains both in movies and in video games that could learn a lesson or two from Khotun Khan. Like you said, first of all, the Mongols don't, at least I don't know a lot about the Mongols and their history, but from what this game portrays, they don't really have a lot of honor. And I love that we get a villain, like you've already described. The very first thing that you see him do is throw, it's not gasoline, but something that's flammable on this samurai's best warrior. And then he throws a torch on him. He's like, oh, fuck you, man. Like, that right there, that's the kind of villain I don't need. I don't need Kylo Ren trying to figure himself out the entire trilogy about, what he should be. And all this. Oh,
you hate Kylo
crap.
Ren so much.
I fucking hate Kylo Ren, dude. That destroyed the. You know why the original trilogy is so good? Because of Darth Vader. Now there's a lot more than that, but it's so good because of Darth Vader. Like, give me a good villain. And there's so many games and movies that give us just a crappy villain. Like you go to Zelda and you have Zant and Girahim that just. Like, when we get to the end of the game, and you're like, these guys weren't really that tough. Like, give me a fucking badass, like Khotun Khan. Like, I'm going to throw some flammable shit on you. I'm going to set you on fire, and then I'm going to be a dickhead and do everything against the way that you're supposed to do them. That's the kind of villain I want, is a straight-up badass. And I think he added so much to the story game because he really felt like, a true villain. So
he did. He was a well-developed bad guy. He was a well-developed bad guy.
And I want to kind of go back to, like you said, you were talking about choices. I'm actually glad that there were not a lot of choices in this game, because that's actually one thing that I kind of hate, like when games go different directions. I know a lot of people like that. Now, at the end, if you get a choice, I'm okay with that. And if you have different endings, which this game did have, I mean, we will kind of talk about that as we say that again. But, like, I actually kind of like when a game just kind of follows a journey. It follows one journey. Like, it doesn't go a bunch of different directions, because that for me becomes too complex, because I'm like, well, what happens if I did this? Well, what happens if I do that? Like, so
plus you want to see all those alternatives too. You want to see how all those different choices play out.
Yeah, and I like that simplicity of the game. And the story was really simple. Like, okay, first of all, you had all these side quests, but they were side quests based around characters. And this is another thing that I absolutely love about the game, is they built up these side characters through these side quests. Something that I think was innovative. I've not really seen it hardly at all in a game now. I'm sure there's a game out there that does it, but I don't know of too many. So you take these side characters and there's something to them and they have a purpose. And instead of doing like 1 or 2 missions, like you do numerous side quests through them, and I think there's a couple random side quests thrown in there, but just
not too many though. Not too many.
Like the villain was awesome, and then Jin was awesome. He has this conflict of, like you already talked about, how he's kind of going against the honors of the samurai, and then you have these side characters and all their side quests, and we see their character arc develop. Like, to be on, like, yeah, the story's not that innovative, but overall, when we're talking about gaming and we're talking about open world games, I still do think it was a great story.
I do too. Like the way it was told. Because like I said, that description I gave at the very beginning of the podcast makes it sound pretty bland. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. But the way it's told, the twists and turns we get along the way, the characters that we get developed, and you hit that on the head. And I absolutely loved it. I didn't have this quite in this order on my outline, but I think it's a good time to mention. Like you said, every character had every important side character, I should say, had 9 or 10 side quests built around them where they're dealing with their own personal struggles and their own personal, something that happened in their life that they are dealing with beyond just this Mongol invasion. And it really helps you to learn and care about these side characters. Plus, by having all these side quests built around, like I said, 8 or 10 of them around each character, it makes the side quests feel so much more important than, here's a question mark on the map, kill 10 boars and turn them in for a reward.
Yep, Assassin's Creed. You listen to Assassin's Creed? Y'all need to quit putting these I love you, Assassin's Creed, but y'all just need to quit putting all these points all over the map and all these side quests that just don't matter. But go ahead.
Exactly. So I loved how they built the side quests around these specific characters, and it really added to the story of the individual characters, and you got to see their inner conflict. They were all dealing with some pretty heavy shit too. Yeah. Every single one of them. But so overall, the main story plus all the little side stories were done very well. They had the twists. And like I said, just Jin having to turn into more like the Mongols, and then Khotun Khan adopts Jin's strategy of poison. They played off each other so well. Yeah. And they really emphasized Khotun trying to learn about his opponents and trying to kind of be that manipulative asshole where he's got Lord Shimura, the leader of the samurai, and Jin's uncle, and he's like, here's all the crazy shit that your nephew's doing that is against the samurai way, just to piss off Lord Shimura. So I thought Khotun, like you said, he was a great villain. It just really added to the story. But before we talked about story quite a bit, we should probably talk about the actual gameplay of the video game. But is there anything else on the story you want to hit on before we kind of jump to the next topic?
I'm kind of going through all the notes that you wrote down here, but I mean, there's also the Ryuzo story, the straw hat, whatever he was, just that little conflict. They had an issue back in the day, when they were kids, and kind of seeing that all play out. There was just, I mean, I think as we sit here and we talk about more and more, I'm dang, for an open world game, that was maybe not groundbreaking, but that was a good story. But I mean, it's something that, we could talk about the story in the entire podcast and go into all the details, but that's really not something we want to do in an open world game. So we'll kind of go ahead and go to the gameplay. And for me, the biggest thing about the gameplay, and I'll throw it to you here when I get done, but was the combat. And here's the thing is, I'm not a huge combat guy. I said it in the beginning, but if you make combat fun, and this game definitely did that, I came to love combat and just fighting in this game. And so I'm going to kind of throw it to you right here. Kind of talk about the combat and what all you loved about it.
Well, my biggest thing, I was a huge fan that they made both stealth or head-to-head equally viable. A lot of games, especially the Assassin's Creed games or even Cyberpunk right now, you kind of have... You can do it. You can either go stealth, or head to head on most missions.
Hold on a second. Cyberpunk just crashed my Xbox again, so we got to take a little break. Go ahead.
But you can usually tell when you start a mission or get to an area, it's kind of maybe built for stealth or built for the more balls to the walls combat. I thought every single encounter, except for the ones where you were maybe forced to sneak or forced into a direct conflict, every single encounter in Ghost of Tsushima was very well balanced to where either strategy worked. I mean, because you could totally be stealthy. The weapons you got were great. The cover of the tall grass, smoke bombs, you could clean out entire forts under stealth, or you could literally walk up right to the front door and say, I'm challenging you.
Yep.
And like they would come right out and meet you, which, we're going to talk about.
What was that called again? It wasn't a
standoffs.
Standoff. Yeah, you're right.
We're going to talk about them. Don't worry, because I loved it. But like, so I love the balance between the stealth or the balls to the walls action. And you know me, we've talked about on this podcast many times. I am not very good at stealth. So more often than not, especially as my character got stronger, you could do the standoffs against more enemies. Like I was much more the head-to-head. Plus, to me, it's just more fun. I don't have the patience to sneak around trying to take guys out and not.
You know what's crazy is when we started this podcast, you were more the stealth guy. I was more the just run forward and like totally just start swinging. And we have totally changed as gamers. Like you're saying here, you're like, I don't have the patience for stealth. And I'm like, I actually like stealth because obviously it's like, you know, a strategy thing, but I don't die as much as I used to in games because I go about them smarter.
You're getting better at it. You've gotten better at it.
I'm okay. I'm at a certain level. Let's not run in with, you know, swords blazing and try to beat 10 people. Like we just don't have those skills yet. But I mean, I've already said this, but they made combat fun. Like, you know, you had all these various combat stances, you know, stone, water, wind, moon, and also ghost, which
is kind of its own
thing. Ghost was awesome. But, like, you know, like whether you're fighting swordsmen, like, you know, shieldmen, people with spears or brutes, like you use different stances to fight these different characters. And it made it fun because you just didn't go in and hit like X and like, you know, a turbo button like LT and X or something like that.
Yeah,
like
you weren't just spamming the same button. Yeah.
Usually your combats are like an attack and a heavy attack. And like this game, like you had those moves after you changed your stances, but you had to change your stances throughout the combat. And that right there, it kept the game fresh throughout. And then as you go along the game, you can enhance those stances to do more and more. So I mean, we talk about the game. Like, I think, the game world, which we'll get to.
We will.
But, like, that's probably the most important thing because the game just actually looks gorgeous, unless you're a next-gen snob like I am right now. But the second most important thing of the game, I would say, is the combat. And, man, they did it beautifully with, like, all these stances and stuff. And one thing that I absolutely loved is, like, you just had a sword. Katana is what's called. Then you had, like, a little dagger. I don't remember what that one was called.
Tonto, I think. Or whatever. Something like that,
But that's
if we
all you
screwed
had
that up,
now.
we apologize if we offended anybody.
I didn't know the name of it. I'm sorry. It looks like a little dagger. They knew what I meant.
Right. But exactly.
Like I said, we're gonna mispronounce stuff, and we don't always know every single thing, and we don't mean to ever offend anybody. We're just stupid, you know. We're just a little stupid sometimes. So
ignorance.
But I loved how I don't like games that have like a lot of weapons. Like a great example of that is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where you just go around and you pick up so many weapons and you usually just disassemble all of them for like, you know, component parts and just there's really no value to it. Like in this game, here's what I love when games do this is like, okay, you give me a sword and a little dagger. Now I know the names are different, but like you just give me those two and then you give me kits where I can customize them because customization, as all gamers know, is becoming hugely important in games because players want to customize to what they like, even if it's just a sword, a bow, whatever. So I love the simplicity of just having, you know, sword, dagger, a
short bow and a long bow was all you had beyond that.
It's a half bow and a long bow, Red. Get the weapons right, okay? The sword, a dagger, which is obviously right. And then a half bow and a long bow. But the weapons were simple. Yes, they had upgrades, but then you could customize them. I thought a little bit too much. There was a little bit too many customizations, but some people may like that. But I mean, they nailed so much when it came to the combat and also the weapons, in my opinion.
And that's why, like, you know, two of the areas I really thought that they innovated in the combat was, you know, we mentioned the standoffs. Probably my favorite part of the combat. You literally walk up to a fort, you press a button, and it calls out, like, the opponent. And as you progress through the game, you get to stand off against more and more opponents. And if you time it right, it's literally one-hit kills against, you can get up to 5 enemies right at the very beginning that you can kill all of them with one press of the button. And it's a great way to really like thin out the herd of your opposition. You know, you take out like 5 of them before you ever even set foot in a base.
Fucking hate those standoffs, man. because that fake move, it got me every single time, dude. And when you get on later in the game,
kills you,
they get better and better and quicker. I can't tell you how many. I don't think I won a standoff like the last third of the game. Like just either they were too fast or that fake move. I fucking hate that juke move, man. It got me every single time. So I'm gonna let you kind of continue with the standoffs, but I was not a fan because I got my ass kicked.
Well, it's just like, and honestly, like they could be difficult because once they started faking you out with that initial fake, and then later on they'd fake 2 times or 3 times, and you're sitting there just holding down the button because like once they attack, you release the button and you kill them. But yeah, if you release early, you get hit, you take a shit ton of damage. It almost kills you actually, and so it is very nerve-wracking. But man, I just love that mechanic, and then the duels. Like throughout the game, you had I'm not even sure how many there were.
5.
There were a lot more than that. There were like 20 total.
If you look at the hub, like they only list 5 duels on there, so that's kind of what I'm going off of.
And those were all around one quest, if I'm not mistaken. But no,
I think they were random. I think you just found them on the map, and I believe you just did them, unless you're talking about different duels. But like, I'll let you continue. But those were a blast. They were an absolute blast.
They just absolutely were, and they were usually in like awesome locations.
Yep.
And just having a one-on-one sword fight with a guy or a girl that you learn their attack pattern, and you just and once you've seen their attack pattern a couple of times, it got a little easy to dodge and deflect and counterattack. Especially once you learn some of the more powerful attacks in the game that are kind of unblockable. Yeah. But man, I love the duels. They were basically like little mini boss fights. And to me, both between like the locations that you fought them and then just the one-on-one feel of them, I thought was just one of my favorite parts of the game. There's a lot more into the combat we can get into. You had your, like, they call them ghost weapons, like, your smoke bombs, your throwing knives, which I think are called kunai. I'm again probably butchering that. And I loved having those little, like, I almost call them gadgets that were really helpful in combat. You like you said, upgrading your stances and flipping between the stances was so easy. You literally held down one button and pushed a direction on the D-pad and you switched stances. It was like so well done. And once you got the hang of it, you flowed through your stances so easily.
Yeah, I think what this game did great at was not making those moves complex. Like there's so many games where it's just too complex. Like I only played a little bit of Age of Calamity, Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, but it was so complex. And like do different things. It was crazy. Like this game, like there was a lot of stances, there was a lot of techniques, there was a lot of different combat that you could do, but they still made it simple. So I absolutely love that. And you're kind of talking about the ghost weapons. I didn't use that many of them. Well, the black powder bomb I used all the time, which is why I didn't really use any of the other ones. But that kunai, like you were saying, you weren't really saying anything. You were just mentioning it. But I didn't use that until like later in the game. But I used it like once or twice, I think by accident. And I was like,
and then you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, this thing is great right here. So those were awesome. But I didn't really use the Halo bomb that much. The sticky bomb. Then like a smoke bomb, I hardly ever used.
Plasma grenade.
The wind chime and then the firecracker, I thought were kind of jokes, but that kunai, however you say, like, apologies for butchering it, and then the black powder bomb. Oh my god, I use that all the time.
Love those.
Like in addition to like all these stances and these techniques you have, like you add in these ghost weapons that are just little tiny things here. I believe they were R1 is all they were, but they add a little bit to the game and they make you like fight different kind of ways. So there's just, when it came to the combat, there was just so much. And then we weren't going to this too much, but like, the actual techniques, like, the skill trees, the abilities and stuff like that. Deflection, evasion, crap like that.
It added good light RPG elements to the game. Because you could upgrade like these skill trees and you could do enough to where you could almost upgrade them all fully, if I'm not mistaken. But you kind of pick and choose.
I upgraded everything fully, actually.
I think you do get enough experience points, like just enough to upgrade everything. So I liked having that little bit of that light RPG because it does make it feel like you're getting stronger and stronger as the game goes on. But man, on top of the combat, which as we said was absolutely amazing, like the exploration of the island. And here was another area where I thought this game really innovated: the guiding wind, like using just the way the wind was blowing to guide you to wherever your destination was. I massively loved that. What did you think of the guiding wind mechanic?
First of all, I thought exploration would be in the world, but okay. We're going to talk about it right now, but no.
I was talking game. It was part of my gameplay, I thought, was exploration.
That's fine. That's fine. I was going to say something else on the combat.
Did you read the outline?
Yeah, I did. Oh, I know what I was going to say is the one thing I didn't like about the gameplay was those charms. I thought there was way too many charms, and this gets into complexity. Like, I don't want to sit there and read the descriptions of every charm and then try to figure out which one I want to fit in my 6 slots. So, overall, I'm going to talk a lot about how much I love this game, but I hate the charms. I absolutely hate that. Yeah, they were nice. They were kind of like little, what do they call them in games? Runes, I guess, would be
like runes,
another way of describing it. But, anyways, on to exploration. The guiding wind was probably one of my favorite things of the game because there's so many games like where you put an objective or a pin or whatever you want to call it on the map, and then you just usually follow a trail. You can fast travel, however you do it, but you usually you don't explore. Like, you usually just go to that objective, like, and you're straight there. It's like a straight line because obviously the quickest way somewhere is a straight line. This guiding wind, like, I love it because it made you explore areas that you would not usually explore if you just had a pin on the map. And the reason it did that is because, like, if you had to go around a mountain or something, like, you had to get the wind back and go in a certain direction. So instead of, like, keeping you on a path or something like that, it actually, like, made you go off the path. Like, made you explore more. And you didn't have to, like, when you're kind of following that objective, like I said, a straight line, this wind, you can kind of go off course, which is, I'm basically just reiterating what I've already said.
But like comparing it to something like we've both been playing Cyberpunk recently, where when you put a destination on the map, like the mini map literally gives you the line to follow.
Yes.
And it's not always the best line.
Well, that's different because that's a freaking city map.
True, but like,
I understand the point you're making.
You're looking at that and like just following a straight line, like you said, as opposed to like looking at the world too. Like that's one thing you miss out on when you're staring at that little dotted line that's telling you exactly where to go. I think Grand Theft Auto was the same way where, like you said, I know those are more city maps. You're also going 150 miles an hour instead of whatever the speed of a horse is, or even on foot. But like, I love that the guiding wind technique really, it simplifies like your screen, your user interface, and lets you look at the beautiful world it was for a PS4 era. I know now you're like, oh, next gen snob, but like, I was a massive fan of the guiding wind mechanic just in general. But the other like exploration thing I really liked, and there weren't that many instances of it though, was the platforming.
Yes.
Like there were a few shrines. There was like 10 or 12 or something. I'm honestly not sure how many. Scattered across the island that had great platforming segments. Were you a fan of those areas as well?
Anything that involves platforming, I absolutely love. Like 2D platforming, 3D platforming, I'm always a huge fan of it unless it's too difficult, like many 2D platformers are. But yeah, just like having these shrines, like you kind of, like you platform, you go around the edges, you got. Well, you don't climb in this game. I keep on getting my open world games mixed up a little bit, but you jump across ledges and stuff like that.
Yep.
I want to say that it was very simple, but it was not very simple.
Some
like there were
tough,
actually some difficult ones, but that made it fun. And then you get up to the top and you just see this beautiful game world at the top of most of these shrines. It just looks absolutely gorgeous, which now brings me to the world. And that's the star of this game. And for me, we're going to go into a lot, but just the colors of this game. That's what initially attracted me to this game. And it's not something like, okay, the graphics look good, but I think their use of all these different colors and the palettes, I think that's what really made this game stand out. So I'm not sure where exactly you want to take it, but overall, the game world, like, I know you're high on it, but just go into just how amazing it was.
Well, I think you're absolutely right when it reminds me a little bit of Breath of the Wild from the standpoint that, okay, it's more realistic than Breath of the Wild was, but it also takes advantage of
but it's not
style.
As realistic as other open world games,
right? Like maybe you're like Assassin's Creed Valhalla or something like that, but it is still just a gorgeous world because they use this really good style that's like close to being realistic. And then, like you said, the color palette in this game, the sunrises and sunsets, the contrast of the terrain with the sky and, the water and rivers and waterfalls. I mean, anyone who's listening to us knows we love our fucking waterfalls. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a very beautiful, rustic kind of game world. It's not like, we've been playing Cyberpunk now and stuff like that. That's a little more modern world. Yeah. or futuristic world, I should say.
That's not modern at all, man. Yeah.
But just, I really love the world. My only like little complaint would be I felt like the regions, and you might disagree, the regions kind of felt a little too similar in how they looked. But I also get that it's an island. It's not the biggest landmass ever, so you're not.
Yeah, but this is where games don't have to follow like logic, in my opinion. Like
Agreed.
It is an island. It would make sense that it's not very big, but you can make it very different. And I sort of agree with you with that, because like the first two parts of the act, where you did Act 1 and Act 2, the first two southern parts of the game, or the map of the world, whatever you want to fucking call it, those were very similar. And here's where I think they messed up and they could have done better, and is like where they start, because the game basically went from the south into the north. It went from summer until the winter, and so I think they started fall too late in that second area. Like, now you had a little bit of fall with the Golden Forest in the original, quote, summer area, but I think, like you said, those first two areas were very similar. They should have had fall dropped. Now, I'm a huge fall fan and a huge fall foliage fan, so that's probably why I'm saying this. But to me, like, they didn't start the like fall scenery until you almost got to the very northern part, and I think that's why those first two areas look so similar. But it didn't really bother me. Like, I think you also have an issue with the terrain. Like, I can tell you today, I was riding around a horse, and there's a lot of terrain and elevation in that game.
There's a lot of elevation.
There are numerous, like, things that I had to go around, but just, you kind of talk about water. And the reason we like waterfalls so much is because water is a beautiful scenery. And kind of going into that, this game, like, they had small lakes, but they also had these little streams everywhere. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of open world games have that, but just like the way they broke them off and put them throughout the game world, it just looked absolutely beautiful. The water effect, I don't know what you want to call it, but water looks different in every single open world game I play.
It really does.
And it's really how I judge a game, is like, what does their water look like? And the water,
and that's a big deal in open world games.
That's how I feel. That's how I judge games. But the water looked absolutely gorgeous, and just, I mean, I know we've already talked about the colors, man, but when you bring all these streams, these waterfalls, like, these different areas, like even the winter area, like just add these colors to the game, like that's why. And there's one thing you haven't mentioned: the flowers. That's really what made this game stand out, like from other games, is because they have a bunch of these flowers that had these different colored petals. And so, like, I don't remember the exact name of this place. I want to say it was in the second area, but there was just this huge field of red flowers. And it just looked absolutely gorgeous. And then when you start the game, oh my God, man, when you start the game and you're going through the woods, and then you hit on those white flowers in the field, and then it's like a Sucker Punch production, or they just said Sucker Punch Presents, or whatever it said. And then it had Ghost of Tsushima. You were just like, damn, that looks amazing, man. And then, like, you had purple, good contrast. Like, you had yellow. I mean, those flower colors, that's really what made the color palette stand out so much to me.
And I really love that, like, we kind of mentioned, or you mentioned a little bit earlier, like the Assassin's Creed maps, or even like the Witcher 3 map or a Cyberpunk map. Like, it's just got so many of those question marks on it that there are so much to do. And Ghost of Tsushima has a little bit of that, but for the most part, they're more like towns or forts or settlements. And then there were some places of interest, like you could go to, like you had the hot springs, you had these pillars of honor, they called, you had the shrines. You had the platform 4, like we mentioned. You had fox dens. A few too many fox dens, in my opinion. But like, I didn't feel like they overwhelmed the map.
Agreed.
With these question marks, like you see in a modern day Assassin's Creed, or a modern day, like the Cyberpunk or something like that. And each one of those like points of interest, like the springs, the pillars of honor, the shrines, they gave you some kind of reward. Like if you do enough hot springs, you get a boost to your health. If you do the Shinto shrines, gave you a
charm.
A charm, thank you. And then
because everything else in the game may be a fucking charm except the hot springs.
Right.
That's not true. You got armor and stuff from other things.
Well, yeah. But it was nice that there was like, there weren't so many of them that you just felt like you were checking off question marks. Like, okay, go into this one, go into this one, go into this one. Like, that gets old in open world games. And a lot of games from a lot of different companies are guilty of that. But man, I will say the map is a huge part of why, like, I don't think this game overstayed its welcome, just because it didn't have 10 bazillion freaking little question marks. There were a decent number, don't get me wrong, but not so much.
It was the right amount for the size of the map.
It really was. So, and I did like that throughout the game world, there were some fun little collectibles like that you could find in camps and in towns. Like you had like Mongol artifacts, which gave you details about the Mongol culture. I
love that part.
I did too.
That was like a history lesson right there. Like, that had to be pretty accurate, I would think, to what happened during those times.
Yeah, and then you throw in like the records, which was like correspondence between different people, and it kind of filled in a little bit of the side stories and things like that. You had the banners you could collect. It's just like the story was, it was part of preserving the history of these different clans. So I liked that we had those little collectibles, but they they didn't just have a big question mark on the map. You just found them as you went through towns and encampments and everything. A few of them were out in the wilderness.
They were question marks originally, though. That's at least when I was going back through the game today, because I still had some question marks somehow. So they did start out like that. But one thing I love that you not mentioned yet was the bamboo strikes. Like, they were difficult,
those were fun.
But those were a ton of fun to do. Just kind of like, it felt like Mortal Kombat. Like, you got to get the fatality right, with the button combination. So absolutely love those. And those actually increase your resolve, which you could use to increase your health. So I absolutely just love that. And Red, I don't remember if you remember the last podcast 6 weeks ago, but the sun was shining through this blind right into my eyes. And damn, this shit's going on again, man. Like, I am sitting here trying to look at the outline, and I am fucking blinded, man. But anyways, another thing I love was the haikus, man. Like, just
those were fun.
It's like, all open world games, like, yeah, there's a part where there are relaxing and stuff, but this game with all the combat, like, for an open world game, it was pretty fast paced. I just love these areas where you could just sit down, meditate. You could actually select a haiku that you wanted to do.
Exactly.
And it brought a peacefulness to the game. And then also most of those views were absolutely amazing. Is there anything else that you want to say on the world?
Not a whole lot. It was like we said, it was just a beautiful game world. Especially, I thought it was one of the more beautiful game worlds of the last generation. I know we're in next gen now, but it was very fun to explore without being so massive that you lost all sense of where you were. Like, yes, maybe it could have been broken up a little better with different regions having a little different features, but all in all, I was a huge fan. But like, kind of. We've talked. I
kind of want to talk about. There's a couple characters now. We talked about characters throughout this entire podcast episode, but there's a couple that I wanted to mention. I think you do too. And one of those is Kenji, dude. Like, we have not mentioned Kenji. Like, that dude is comedic relief in this game. Like just a sake. Okay, first of all, he's a sake vendor, which is absolute, like, just cool
that's okay by us.
Shit, but he just gets like in trouble for like swindling townspeople, and like, just, I love the comedy that he brings to the game. Like, he didn't really have a big part in the game, but just, I felt like we had to mention him. Like, we mentioned most of the characters.
Absolutely.
We're not going to really stay on too long, but I absolutely love Kenji. Is there any other characters that we didn't mention or that we didn't talk about as much that you would kind of like to mention?
Well, Kenji was obviously an amazing one. Like we kind of talked about with the story earlier and the side characters. Like, I love that they all had something complex going on.
Yes.
Like Lady Masako, she's like trying to avenge that her family was slaughtered. It turns out it was her sister who did it, and her sister was like jealous and wanted revenge because she got sold off to like an abusive husband, whereas Lady Masako got to marry like a samurai and have a great life. And then Ishikawa was chasing down a former student who he thinks betrayed him. And it turns out she didn't really betray him. She got captured. And the only way to keep herself alive was to, I think they said she was helping to train the Mongols. She was actually giving like quick, easy deaths to prisoners, and so they wouldn't be tortured. So she was, so I love that every one of these characters. And then Ryuzo, I'm going to get his.
Ryuzo.
You mentioned like he had the childhood, beef with Jin, but then he betrays Jin because he's trying to feed the Straw Hat Ronin.
Yeah.
They show them as this starving group that's like just barely surviving, and Ryuzo wants to get the bounty so he can feed his people. So like, all these people, they have these flaws, but they tell great stories, and they are longer, drawn out story arcs. But Like I said, Kenji is one you got to call out just because
and then Norio was another character that I really did like, that warrior monk.
Oh, the monk.
He also had he had a lot of conflicts going on. I can't remember exactly, but there's something, his brother was murdered by the Mongols or something like that. He felt guilty about it, so
his brother was considered like a protector, and he had to take that on, that mantle. Yeah, I liked him too.
He was big enough that I thought we should mention, like I said, didn't play too much into the game, but did play a part in the game. But as far as characters, I think that's kind of all we want to talk about. So it's kind of going to the reception and kind of the recognition of the game before we wrap it up. But here's actually one thing that kind of shocked me. I can't believe this game only sold like 5 million units. Like, I thought that this game was sold so much more. Now, I know that it is a PS4 exclusive, but I just thought it was going to be more than that, man.
And it was at the very end of the console generation. You got to realize it came out in July, the new consoles. And that number's as of...
They should have waited. They should have waited until next gen.
Oh, and then I think that was as of November of 2020, so it may be a little higher now. What blew my mind, though, is the gap between the user score and the Metacritic and like the critic score. And I know when we talked about The Last of Us Part 2, we talked about how it was the other way. The critical scores were through the roof and the user scores were in the basement. Of course, that was because some butthurt people were, that was a whole debacle. But this game, it seems like everyone I've talked to who's played this has loved it more than the ratings it's got. Like, it's sitting at an 83 on Metacritic, which, don't get me wrong, isn't bad. But the user score is over a 9. It's at a 9.2 as of today. I'm like, that divide is kind of shocking to me. And have you talked to anyone who's played this who didn't like it?
No, everyone I've talked to is like it. And I think, 83 is like a B, almost a B minus, man. So I don't think it's great of a score, especially considering a 9.2 could be like, translated to a 92%. So, I mean, it's only like 9 points difference, in hypotheticals. But like, I just think 83 is too low. Like, the game, it did have some glitches. I said that it wasn't as polished as it probably should be. But now that I'm playing Cyberpunk, freaking Ghost of Tsushima looks polished as hell. I know we have our differences in that game, and we will talk about it in the next episode. But it's a little bit too low for me because I've not met anybody that doesn't like the game. It's one of my favorite games that I've played lately. One of my most favorite open world games. So, like, it's a top 10 game for me. I don't know if I put it in the top 5. I have to, kind of sit there and think about that, which I'm never going to do.
That takes some thought.
I just say top 5 or I say top 10. I would say it's definitely one of my top 10 games. Like I said, one of the best games I've played lately. So, overall, I was very, very impressed with the game. Like you kind of said, I know they had to release it at a certain time, but maybe if you would have waited until next gen, maybe you could have done a little bit more. But, it got Game of the Year nominations from both the Game Awards and then, other publications. So it did get the recognition.
TGPZ Awards, man. The very prestigious TGPZ Awards.
But that's kind of all I want to say on Ghost of Tsushima. Did you have any other, that's not really closing thoughts that we just did, but did you have any closing thoughts on the game?
I mean, my biggest thought is I completely agree that it was an amazing game. I think it deserved a little better. And I know the biggest knock that I read when I was going back and looking at critical reviews, but it's like, it doesn't innovate enough. It wears
what
its
open world game
very
does
openly.
Right,
and that's why even it's hard to innovate when open world has been such a dominant genre now for a number of almost a decade probably. I mean, since open world really became something that we had the hardware to do and to do well. So to me, I just thought though it took so many great open world concepts and did them all very, very well. It polished them up. The combat was very fun. The story was engaging. The side characters were well developed. The exploration, the world were all top notch. I'm like, you put it all together, and yes, maybe it didn't reinvent the wheel in any of those areas, but all in all, it brought them together into one of the most polished packages that I've ever seen. And that's what I nominated.
I don't need to really give my closing thoughts because I pretty much just agree with every single thing that you said right there. So before the wrap up, let's kind of talk about the next episode. Let's just get back to the gaming industry next episode because I want to talk. We've been on for 6 weeks, people. There's a lot that I want to talk about. And actually, our last podcast episode, I don't even know if I got my Xbox Series X by that time, but I have it now.
I'm not sure if you did.
I want to Cyberpunk. We're definitely going to be talking about Cyberpunk debunking some other gaming industry stuff on the next episode. But let's go ahead and wrap it up. All these links will be in the description. You can support us on Patreon or PayPal. If you can't support us financially, leave a review or a rating. That kind of just helps out with SEO, and like when people search for video games, we show up higher the more reviews and ratings we get. And then also, we have merchandise on our websites. Two Guys Playing Zelda, don't really focus on that too much, but TGPCgaming.com. I'm adding products almost daily over there, so definitely check that out. And it is an affiliate shop, so we may earn a commission on purchases through our links. Red, kind of talk about our YouTube, Discord, and some of the social media stuff we got going on.
Well, basically, we're on YouTube, Discord, and social media. But no, on YouTube, though, we got TGPZ Gaming. We've got Two Guys Playing Zelda. Obviously, that one's more dedicated to just Zelda. TGPZ Gaming is a little more open. Discord is one of our big focuses now. We absolutely love the interaction we have with other gamers on there. We talk general gaming, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, booze, TV shows, sports. Like, we talk about a little bit of everything. So hit us up over on the Discord. And of course,
we bash people that aren't spammers, apparently, because I did that yesterday.
Oops, sorry, guy.
That's big in the video games. I thought he was a spammer. I was like, get off of here, spammer.
We were wrong on that one. But that happens.
It happens.
And, we're also on Twitter and Instagram, Busted Buttons PC for podcasts. So look for us. Great to get back to it, Hick.
Yes.
It's been way too long. I'm glad we were all kind of recovered from COVID, from the holidays. It's good to get back at it. I'm looking forward to getting back at it next episode.